At the end of the last legislative session and before this one, the hot issue was a transportation tax package. What's the latest on that?
Well, let me start by prefacing the fact that, I think we all understand that we do need to deal with some of the maintenance issues with respect to Washington State. We've got economic drivers related to transportation. We've got a couple of key ports, especially in Seattle and Tacoma, that we have to consider. And so taking that into consideration, I would say that there are many of us who do believe that there are some infrastructure concerns that we do have, and at some point we're going to have to deal with those things. That being said, I was one of those who thought that 2014 was probably one of those years where it was likely that a package was going to pass. However, in the recent months, there's been a few issues that have come up. We've heard about the pontoons that have been leaking, and I just saw a picture the other day where the steel is now corroding and concrete's breaking apart inside these pontoons. I get some issues with that, of course. We've had some issues with our ferries, where they'll build these new boats and they're listing right out of the dock, which is a concern. Then you've got the Big Bertha, everybody's probably heard about in downtown Seattle, that deep bore tunnel that they're drilling below the city, and how it ran into a pipe and stopped construction for several days, and we've still got a long way to go with that. And so there are some things that people need to be concerned about. There's one other issue that's kind of thrown probably a big kink in this, and that is one of the things the governor is now doing, and that's related to his low carbon fuel standards with other states on the West Coast and Canadian government, which you could see adding anywhere from about 90 cents to a gallon of gas to about $1.50 or more per gallon of gas. And we've been down here arguing and debating over 10, 12 cents to a gallon of gas, and you put this on top of it. And it's not that I don't think people don't see the need for some of the transportation concerns we have, and they want to see those improvements made. But at the end of the day, the question comes down to, can they afford it or not? And I know a lot of my constituents and many other of the people around the state are very concerned that these are just going to be too costly, and we've got some things that we got to fix within the system first.
And how would you fix those things in the system?
Oh, where do I start? I think that, first of all, let's give a clearer understanding as to what's going on in Washington as compared to other states. We are the most expensive place in the country to build anything transportation related. We spend more money on our ferries than anywhere else in the country. We spend more money to build a bridge than anywhere else in the country. We spend more money to build, even just putting down some asphalt on the road, than anywhere else in the country. Why is that? First of all, you need to understand we're also been noted as the cleanest state in the country when it comes to how we deal with the state of Washington environmentally. But we spend more on environmental mitigation, anywhere from 2 to 10 times more on things like environmental mitigation than any other state in the country does. We're averaging costs of 1.5 to 2 times more expensive to build anything. And so we've got to control a lot of how we're doing this whole construction thing. And my professional background is actually in construction. And so dealing with concrete and dirt and all those things is something I've been doing most of my life. And so when I see how the state's been doing it, let's just say there's a lot of room for improvement there, especially when we have concrete evidence that the rest of the country is able to do it far cheaper than we are. We need to start looking at those tactics and reforms and how they do it so that we can do it for a lot less money.
Some people talk about how there are scarce resources when it comes to transportation funding. What else can our state do to ensure we maximize those resources?
Well, one of the things that Washington State does that's very different from the rest of the country is we actually, believe it or not, charge ourselves sales tax to build everything we build in Washington State. People think, well, okay, how big of a number can that be? In the last transportation proposal that came before the House of Representatives in 2013, the hard dollar amount in sales tax alone was over $600 million. $600 million is real money. $600 million is a lot of projects that we could be building with that $600 million. I'll give you an example in my district, the Highway 2 corridor. For $600 million, I could make that one of the safest corridors in the state of Washington. And right now it's the deadliest highway in the state, one of the top 10 in the country. And so with that money, we can get a lot more of these projects done. But the other thing too to take into consideration is the job aspect of it. In Washington State, the highest level of unemployment in any part of our professional sector is related to the construction trades. Right now, and this is starting in 2008 until now, we're averaging over 30% unemployment still in the construction trades. And what we're seeing currently happening in our transportation system is that the majority of our money is being spent before we ever even break ground. I've got a project just outside of Monroe right now. There's a little sign that says this project costs $73 million. That's not the case. It's a $180 million project. More than 60% of that money was spent before we ever broke ground. And they spent that over 8 years. It took them 8 years to spend over 60% of it, and we still hadn't broken ground. That $73 million is what we're actually paying the contractor to build, what we actually are going to be using. We've got to at least reverse that like other states have, where they're spending typically they're spending at least 60% of their money is going towards actual construction. We're less than 40% going towards actual construction on most of our projects. Those are the types of things we need to fix in Washington State so that we can get a bigger bang for our dollar, so that we can put more of these people back to work, and I think be better stewards ultimately to the taxpayers' dollars.
You mentioned not spending the sales tax on transportation projects. What's the likeliness of that happening in this legislature?
Well, the problem that you've got with charging ourselves sales tax is what that does essentially is it takes that money out of the transportation budget and it puts it into the operating budget. What's happened then over the course of the last several years is there's now this appetite within the operating budget. That money's been coming in. Now remember, now it comes in spurts. Right now we're not getting any new money. You're only going to get it if you pass a transportation package, which is more gas taxes and weight fees and things like that. But because the operating budget has become so used to that money coming in, and they've got this appetite for more, it's a way of essentially taking and moving money from one pot to the other. But here's a key thing you need to understand is we're actually taking out bonds, which is like a mortgage. We're taking out loans to tax ourselves. That $600 million that I talked about is actually in a loan, 20 to 30-year loan. Does it really make sense for us to be taking out loans to charge ourselves tax so that we can move money from one area of what government does to another area? We've been doing that for a while, and we need to get out of that habit.